we talk a lot on this show about the poor in this country. We talk about what is happening. On Capitol Hill right now, you see Democrats amassing the votes to pass a bill that will deal with funding for police. We saw the previous bills that were passed. And Reverend Dr. William Barber has been asking this question, which is, I think, is a critical one, where he talks about what folks can do. And this was a tweet that he sent out a little bit earlier today. And this is what he said. He said, "Why is it that Dems and some Republicans can come together to pass a policing bill, but can't pass living wages, voter protections, and extended child tax credit?" Well, that was a meeting on Capitol Hill about this very issue with faith leaders. My next guest was actually in the meeting. Give us an update on what happened there. Can we actually see some movement on that? Congressman Ro Khanna, glad to have you back on the show. So, all right, what happened? What was the conversation? What's the outcome?
Well, I'd gone down to Reverend Barber's church, and he said, why don't you call up 50 clergy leaders and have members of Congress listen to what people actually want? And they were very clear that we've got to get a living wage. We got to at least get a vote on it, that we need to get the child tax credit. As Reverend Barber put it, we tried it. We did it in the American Rescue Plan. It reduced poverty 50%. And it's as if we're teasing people that we're taking it back. I mean, we know it works. We know it reduces poverty. We need to make that permanent. And then we need voting rights. And he was very blunt. We heard the testimony of a young woman in Baltimore who talked about a sheriff coming to her apartment, a single mother, her being basically evicted, staying in a motel room because the child tax credit expired. So those of us who listened and participated are really going to push for another vote with the speaker. And then, of course, the issue is the Senate. We've passed some of these policies in the House. We need the Senate to vote on it.
And the point that he makes, I think, is a critical one, because when you hear Senator Schumer and others say, oh, we're going to keep, another bite of the apple, another bite of the apple. Well, let's see the same thing when it comes to the poor in this country, when it comes to voting rights. People, I can tell you right now, African Americans want to see some movement, especially on the voting bill. Also, I've been saying, why in the heck aren't Democrats coming back and putting the George Floyd Justice Act on the table? It already passed the House, but now the challenge should be, and I've said this to even some of the family members, they should be publicly saying to President Joe Biden, call a meeting at the White House, tell McConnell, tell Lindsey Graham, tell Tim Scott to be at that meeting and sit across from those families and say why they're not moving on the George Floyd Justice Act.
Roland, that would be powerful. But here's the thing. The Republicans, you know this, when they want to repeal the Affordable Care Act, they don't just vote once. They vote on the repealing 70, 80 times. And I don't understand why the Democrats can't have the same passion. I mean, we ought to vote on voting rights, not just once out of the House. Let's keep passing it. Let's keep telling the Senate to put pressure on it. Let's vote on the George Floyd bill. And put pressure to get that passed. And let's vote on living wage again.
Obviously, you're going to hear folks say, oh, well, we're now in the fall and we don't have much time. Well, let's see here. Today is September 23rd. Last I checked, the United States Senate confirmed a Supreme Court justice pretty damn quick before an election.
We have time. We figure out how to get things done when we want to get things done. And we certainly have the time. I mean, it doesn't take that long to put something on the floor. I think let's just be candid, Roland. And this is about what is the message that we want to go into the midterms with. And there are those of us who are saying that we can't take people's votes for granted, who are poor, who are low income. Those are our voters. We can't take black people for granted. And okay, fine. The frontliners wanted a police funding bill, but we also need to deliver for working people and for the African-American community. And that means let's go into the midterms of voting on these key issues. And I think that's the key thing, is to convince the party that these are issues we need to highlight going into the election.
And on that particular point you just made there, you have a lot of those frontliners. Again, the Democratic Party does a whole lot to protect them, but here's the whole deal. they aren't the only people represented in Congress. You also need voters voting in these statewide races for the United States Senate.
You do, and you need a turnout in their districts. I mean, many of them need poor people, low wealth folks who in many parts comprise a third of the electorate in our districts, half of the electorates, and in the states. They need them to turn out. And they're not going to turn out if they don't see that we're fighting for a livable wage. They're not going to turn out if they think, okay, we did the child tax credit and now that money is not coming back. And they're certainly not going to turn out if they don't see us fighting like hell for voting rights. I mean, as Reverend Barber said, we promised John Lewis that we would do this. We promised. He was, as you know, sick the last few months of his life. We said this is going to be his legacy. And so, so we took a vote, and then the Senate hasn't voted on it, and we said, okay, they're not going to do the filibuster. It just seems we don't have enough fight on it. This is such a basic issue, and they rewrote it, they weakened it, and they still didn't vote on it in the Senate.
That is absolutely crazy. Okay, you had that meeting with 50 members. What's next?
Well, the meeting, I think the president should meet with the clergy. I mean, the clergy in that room, who are 50 leaders, and I appreciate that they met with us in Congress, but they represent millions of voters. And I think the president meeting with them, one, it would take back faith for the Democratic Party, the real faith, the faith that Dr. Barber and others talk about, which is standing with the poor, standing for justice. We need to be talking about that, not let just the Republicans have faith. And I think the president needs to look some of these folks in the eye and say, here is our plan. Here's what we're going to do before the end of the election. Here's what I'm committed to doing in the next 2 years. But he should have a meeting with them. And that's what I have been pushing for with the White House. All
right. Well, look, hopefully it happens and we see some action. Representative Ro Khanna, thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Roland. Thank you for having me back.
Go to our panel here. Brianna, I want to start with you. The point that he made there, Democrats are so protective of these frontliners, these Democrats who are in, purple districts or some that lean Republican. And frankly, it pisses off a lot of other people that they are just, giving everything to them as opposed to really looking at the broader agenda.
I think that talking about the broader agenda, I think that we can say everybody should get behind helping children. I think it's too divisive. And I do think even in, you say the red districts and trying the purple that we're scared and we're going to just promote what we have done and not get behind in these last months to do even more. I don't think it needs to stay that way. I do think that we can move the needle more with an actual welfare net. And I think that you can understand, we as Democrats can also talk to Republicans to make sure they understand the commonality of it. As it was stated in the beginning, we talked about how we can get around gun control now, barely. But, we have conversations about that where we should be able to have conversations about helping our poor. And I think when they realize that, it's the Christian thing to do and Republicans love to be Christians, we can have different sort of conversations, but it doesn't need to necessarily be about red, blue, purple, but us as family members, right? And helping our community.
Michael.
I don't have that much faith in white people, but okay. So when we look at the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act and Representative Ro Khanna, and thanks for having this interview also, Roland. Yes, it passed the House of Representatives in March 3rd, 2021 by a vote of 220 to 212. They should try it again in the Senate. I think they should use the strategy that Representative James Clyburn said. Clyburn said if qualified immunity is the sticking point, he said take qualified immunity out of the bill, get the rest of the bill passed now, come back and get qualified immunity later. Because you need 60 votes in the Senate, which means you need 10 Republicans. So, yes, they should try again, but there's a difference between trying to just say to voters that you tried and actually really trying to get the bill passed. Those are two different things. You need 10 Republicans. So if you're going to get the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act passed in the Senate, you're going to have to do it a different way. Okay. And then after the 2022 midterm elections, then you could come back and get qualified immunity passed. But we have to use a different, the structure of the Senate is much different than the House. So you're going to have to use a different strategy oftentimes in the Senate to get that 60 vote threshold than you do in the House of Representatives, which is just a simple majority.
Matt?
I think it's abhorrent that we even have to have this conversation. People shouldn't have to beg for basic stuff. If, 10% of the population is living in poverty and 1 in 6 are not getting a livable wage, it's absurd that we have 500 people holding us hostage in Washington. And I understand we have to talk about the mechanisms about how to address that. But one, I think this harkens back to our first conversation about Kansas City, Missouri. I mean, this is exactly what faith leaders are supposed to do, be moral leaders and stand for the least of these, irrespective of their, respective religion, number one. But beyond that, the idea that we allow political jockeying to upset the idea that, we still have large percentage of our population that doesn't have what it needs and is working every day and not making a livable wage, it should make all of us sick. So I think we need to have a systemic conversation about us as citizens and allowing these representatives to hold us hostage. The fact that we should have to beg for basic things is abhorrent in a country that touts itself as the wealthiest country in the world and one that is guided by rights and a respect thereof. And it just makes me sick that we have to hope that they come around to vote the right way. It should be we get what we need, period.
Well, but this is why I think about what A. Philip Randolph had to do when he was at the White House, and he was challenged when President Franklin Delano Roosevelt was challenged by A. Philip Randolph, and he said, Philip, make me do it. And he was like, okay, I got something for your ass. And when he threatened to bring 200,000 people to the nation's capital, FDR signed an executive order. But this is what I'm talking about when we are talking about how we use our power. And let me see, did I take the picture of it? Let me see if I did, because I was this matter of fact, I'm glad I did, because I was y'all often hear me talk about chaos or community, Dr. King's book, which really is one of the most important books. Everybody should have a copy of it. And one of the things that you often hear me refer to when I'm talking in my speeches on this show, I'm referencing this particular section of the book where he's talking about black leadership, where he's talking about what needs to happen. And this is what King writes in the book. He says, there are already structured forces in the Negro community that can serve as the basis for building a powerful, united front. The Negro Church, the Negro Press, the Negro fraternities and sororities, and Negro professional associations. We must admit that these forces have never given their full resources to the cause of Negro liberation. There are still too many Negro churches that they condition their members to adjust to the present evils over here. Too many Negro newspapers have veered away from their traditional role as protest organs, agitating for social change, and have turned to the sensational and the conservative in place of the substantive and the militant. He says too many Negro social and professional groups have degenerated into snobbishness and a preoccupation with frivolities and trivial activity. But the failures of the past must not be an excuse for the inaction of the present and the future. These groups must be mobilized and motivated. And on that particular point, that's what I'm talking about, folks. And so you heard me say on numerous times, you've got more than 2 million members of the Divine Nine. So you've got alphas and kappas and omegas and sigmas and iotas and deltas and AKAs and zetas and sigma gamma rho. You've got Eastern Star, you've got Prince Hall Mason, you've got Sigma Pi Phi fraternity, the Boule, you've got the Links, you've got all these different groups. But the question is, how are they using the collective membership to be able to sort of drive this issue? And this is where I believe that when you begin to have not just the leaders, see, I'm not interested in the leaders meeting at the White House. I'm not interested in the leaders meeting with President Biden or President Joe Biden. What I'm interested in them coming back and pressing that button saying to every member, I want you to send an email to your House member, send this, hit corporations. How do you take that collective power to be able to advance the Black collective? But unfortunately, too many of our organizations are concerned about their own internal politics and their own meetings internally, as opposed to how do you begin to advance and change things for the Black community. And so I would hope that they would use their power to listen, to do what Reverend Barber's been talking about, to do what others have been talking about, and that is to be able to affect this change. And in fact, I showed you that tweet earlier from Dr. Barber, and one of the things that he posted, and this is what he posted here, he said the Poor People's Campaign, they are organizing to reach 5 million poor and low-wage people and low-propensity voters across the nation. Our votes are demands. Folks, numbers don't lie. When you're able to reach those low-propensity voters, you can change whole elections, and that's how groups must be using their power. All right, folks, back to our Roland Martin Unfiltered video in just one moment.
When we invest in ourselves, our glow, our vision, our vibe, we all shine. Together, we are Black beyond measure.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punches!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay Black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?